Broadcasting live from the Zimmer Communications World Headquarters. This is Wake Up Mid-Missouri.
Get ready, pal.
Here's your host, Randy Tobler.
Good morning. Welcome into Wake Up Mid-Missouri in the wake of a busy election, municipal and local elections. So we'll be covering that this morning. A Taiwanese earthquake and the fallout from that, I'm sure, will be felt in the days to come. Iran is rattling its sabers, and that it will be seen at the fuel prices that you will be paying, and who knows, maybe worse, threats to the Israeli embassies around the globe, according to experts. And Mary Elizabeth Coleman will join us later on in the program at 7:10. We'll be talking with Mary Elizabeth, former congressional district candidate number 3 for the CD number 3, and now for SOS, the Secretary of State, and Zack Smith from Heritage talking with us about everything from Trump's fiascos around the nation to some of his one of his lawyers getting disbarred in California. We're going to talk to him about that. Stephanie Bell's over there wearing her red, even though it's not Friday.
It's not, but it's like
she's allowed to do so.
It's the start of the baseball season, and I have a whole collection of red because Republicans wear red.
There you go. And Miss Hannah is over there. Did you vote yesterday? Everything turned out the way you hoped?
I didn't have anything to vote on.
Oh, there was nothing. No, nothing on the ballot in California. Eh?
Not that I saw. I did extensive research yesterday.
All right.
And I didn't see any signs up for polling places in town.
Wow. Okay, so it was an idle voting day, election day in California, Missouri. John Marsh, you're going to be getting to know a couple of new council members in Jefferson City.
Yeah, in fact, a couple of the incumbents got defeated. Wow. Jack Deacon lost his first ward seat to Randy Hoselton, and Randall Wright lost in the 4th Ward to Chris Leichel, who's a big deal with the Jefferson City Parks and Rec Commission. And there's a couple of 2 new challengers, Trika Young and Mackenzie Jobe, both got elected to open seats in the capital city.
So is the unseating of incumbents sort of a tradition in Jefferson City, or is this something? Was there some turmoil
it's pretty
or some
unusual.
angst?
That's usually the power of incumbency, even down to the city level. That's rather unusual.
I find it interesting.
It is interesting, and I think lately what we've seen is, and people have been surprised at, as conservative as people know that the capital city is, the council has been much more left of the community, or at least they have. Many people have alleged that they are much more left, and I think folks are calling yesterday a clean sweep for the quote-unquote liberals.
A lot of contention there on the Jeff City Council.
So really a move to the right, if you look at the council at large, just the
left.
Oh, it's moving to the left now.
Yeah, it was a clean sweep last night for the quote-unquote liberals.
Oh, for the liberals.
Yes.
But I thought you said the community was largely
conservative.
So why is this? This makes no sense to me as an outside observer.
I think for the last 10 years, the council has been left of the community, and I don't know why necessarily that is. Low turnout.
It's continuing that way then from last night.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I think it swung a little bit back more to the right, and now it's swinging back to the left.
Really?
Yeah.
This is interesting to me. Huh.
Mm-hmm.
That makes zero sense.
I was surprised by the results last night, but it's all, I mean, what was the turnout? 16%, 12%? It was so low. It's all about who can turn out folks to vote for them.
And it didn't meet, in Boone County, it didn't meet Brianna Lennon's expectations either. It was 16%, I think?
I think that's Boone County, yeah. It was pretty
14.8% in Cole County turned out.
Wow.
That's crazy.
I wonder if the weather the evening before had something to do with that. I don't know.
No.
Why would it be so low?
That beat the predictions of Cole County's clerk earlier on. County Clerk Steve Korsmeyer was calling for 10%. He got almost 15%.
Wow.
And April elections are notoriously, low on turnout.
Well, in Boone County, if you're a senior citizen, you have some hope, depending on what the commissioners will do, that you might have a freeze in your property taxes. That's not going to make the people at Show Me very happy, because they were saying cut for all or cut for none. But it won, 2-1, I think, that issue, roughly?
Pretty significantly. And then, of course, we had the recall election, which was successful against Nick Knoth.
Yeah.
So I was pretty shocked there. And then they elected Lisa Meyer. Which, congratulations this morning, Lisa. That was like the one, for me, in looking at all of the election results, that was like the one highlight for me last night. I was like, oh, wonderful.
Well, other than Ashland, right?
Oh, yeah, that's true. I had kind of suspected that was coming. But yes, we reelected Mayor Doris Slinker last night in Ashland, and excited to continue to work with him.
And a couple of the a building with the VOAG classes will be connected to the high school, and we'll get a new roof on the high school as a result of some 2 issues passing.
Yeah, I mean, Southern Boone has been growing so significantly that they've kind of they're working their way through all the buildings, and I'm suspecting it's going to be time shortly to start over again. But I think when I first moved to town, they had just completed the primary, or in addition to the primary, and then they kind of did a middle school project, and my son is the beneficiary. I think he went into one of the primary or elementary right when the new wing opened, and then of course the middle school project just completed, and he starts middle school, and hopefully this high school project will be just completed as he decides to go to high school.
You timed it like that.
Yeah. And Brian, you were reporting on things today and on the election outcome.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously the Nick Cano thing is huge, but I want to just follow up on Stephanie's numbers, and I've got these in the story, 939theeagle.com and kws.com, but I want people to look at that. Look at the graphic that is on the website, 939theeagle.com, kws.com. That is a huge facility, and it all has to do with growth. We had the superintendent on this show, Dr. Roth, right before the election. He said, Stephanie, there are about 525 students at the high school. In the next decade, they think they're going to have 700. And I'm going to say this again, this number is incredible. Southern Boone R1's district's population in terms of the school, 1,500 a decade ago, 2,000 today. And that's because of the growth. I mean, you see construction everywhere down there. It's amazing. I think the this recall of Kanoth kind of underplayed, quite frankly, by a couple of the television newscasts had this as like the 3rd or 4th story. This is your lead story, folks. This is the first time a Columbia City Councilman and I know, we just don't see it. 34 years. It's just, I was surprised. I thought it'd be closer than this. He lost 531 to 394. He needed a big turnout. He did not. I mean, that's not bad. It's 16.3%. But he probably needed a turnout of about 25%, maybe 26% to have a shot at this. And the activists got out, but we're kind of in just an unprecedented situation. Nobody knows what's going to happen next as far as the first ward. If you're a first ward person and you need some help with City Hall, you're kind of on your own right now, folks. I mean, I guess you could call the mayor if you have a constituent issue, but it's going to take some time. This was a surprise.
I find it interesting, and I guess what really is fascinating to me, there's 2 things about this. Based on what you were saying, Stephanie, down in Jefferson City, a little tack to the left after a tack to the right.
Correct.
In this big election year, we see a pretty vivid response to recall a sitting councilman toward the left. I'm just wondering if the Huffer-Puffers on the right who think that there's some big anti-liberal, anti-progressive movement in this country may be having a little too much swagger. I don't know if the local election and the local politics in this particular election yet last evening have anything to do with predicting what may be happening nationally. I'm not sure that this country is as right as our right echo chamber may think it is. I don't know. It's just I'm asking the question.
I think you bring up a very good point nationally. I mean, that's a whole other issue. But
polls are tightening with Biden and Trump. I mean, why? If Biden's economy is so bad, if the borders are so porous, if a weak national imprint on the international stage is leading to all of the chaos, why isn't the red brand leading by 10, 15, 20 points? This country may not any longer be center-right, at least in our electoral politics. I think we lead our lives in a very conservative manner. Yeah. Most liberals that I know live a very conservative life personally. But in electoral politics, I'm seeing some interesting bellwethers here.
In the national media is much different than it used to be. I mean, their coverage of the way they cover things is completely different. But in terms of, we know Columbia is, particularly the first ward, Randy, that is, I wouldn't call that a bellwether. That's the most progressive ward in the city. And I'm going to say flat out what the CPOA said on this show on Wake Up Mid-Missouri. I linked to the interview on our website, 939theeagle.com, KWS.com. Matt Nichols was on this show, Randy. You asked him the question, and he said that Kenoth was targeted by those who supported defunding and abolishing the police.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting. First ward, very progressive. You go up to the second ward, nearby ward, that's had Andrea Weiner for a number of years, and then Rachel Prophet temporarily, and Lisa Meyer wins handily.
That
so
I find interesting.
It's hard to tell.
So you really can't extrapolate much from what happened locally.
It could be, first of all, no conservative's going to win in the first ward. We know that. And Kenoth is pretty progressive. He's just not as progressive as they'd like.
I'm going to ask it in a different way. What is happening to the body politic and the American people and the people of Columbia in the first ward when they look at, I saw the other night on a scatter plot on the ABC News feed, and they had this full screen graphic of all of the shootings and where there were injuries or murders.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't see the background map. And this was, I don't know whether it was just in this year or in the last 2 years. Unbelievable. How can people, did you see what I saw?
It was Nia Henson.
It was a dramatic graphic.
Megan Drakis and Lucas put that graphic together. It was very well done. Those are recent shootings, by the way.
Yeah.
Those are recent.
I wasn't just in the last year.
Within the last
3 months or
something. The last month or so.
Okay. What is going on in the mind of the, okay, you think about this. 84% of the people, presumably living in and around Columbia, that see what's going on with the shootings, the violence, the unfettered gun violence, they either don't show up or they unseat probably the most conservative councilman that you could imagine there, right? Even though he may not be a conservative's conservative.
Yeah, he definitely opposed defunding the police. But I
find this interesting. I want to go back to sociology school. How can people look at what's going on and either not show up or show up and vote to now what is he going to be replaced with? What are we looking at?
They're not looking at what's going on, though, and that's a big part of the problem, in my humble opinion.
Look at the voter turnout numbers if you want an answer to a lot of them.
That's what I'm saying.
And that's what Randy's getting at, John and Hannah. It's 16%, and that's where you're coming up with your 84%.
84% of the people don't show up. They don't care. But I'll bet if a shooting happens in their backyard, where's the police? What's going on? How come you're not protecting me? What the hell's going on here? You see what I mean?
You're spot on.
I find this fascinating.
You're spot on, and they'll be the first one to pick up the phone and call me and say, what am I going to do about it in the newsroom? I mean, if you have to vote.
But by God, cancel a blues festival. Oh my God, what are we going to do? The blues festival was canceled.
And that got a big reaction. It's just,
I'm sorry, I just find it's hilarious.
Well,
and it's sad.
But 16% is pretty. I mean, it is higher than what we've had in the past. Although she was going with 19%, but. There are people that did go out, and kudos to the people that did, and kudos to the election judges as well. But a lot of it, Randy, has to do with what Lisa Meyer said, and that is taking voting seriously and making that a priority. And however decide you want to vote, that's important to do.
I'm sorry for that.
Hold on to your britches, because here they come. They're coming back.
Donald Trump at the border talking about it. Now it's time for our daily DC rundown and get a big serving of that with Stephanie Bell.
And he has co-opted the word bloodbath and is now calling it Biden's border bloodbath. And we're going to be hearing more about the border because, of course, the Senate sent over to the House this foreign aid package, and that is what we're expecting to come over or them to discuss when they get back from spring break. Speaker Johnson has been talking a little bit about how he might tweak that. It was actually combined, and they talk about, we're going to tie some of this aid with some stricter measures at the border. Whether or not that gets busted up into separate bills or stays together is yet to be seen. But we're also hearing more about what Speaker Johnson might do there, whether it might be a loan, whether there's some way to use seized Russian assets to help offset Ukraine's costs. But just this morning, we're hearing that the Biden administration is wanting Congress to approve an $18 billion sale of F-15 jets to Israel. And so that's even more money. So that, I think, will be a hot topic of conversation when they get back. But interestingly, Randy, you brought up this morning that a lot of your liberal friends lead conservative lives, and that, we're not as far apart maybe as you might think. And there's a new poll out, I think maybe yesterday, and it's from the AP. And it says Americans are divided, but Americans still agree on most core American values. And you'd be shocked at the numbers. But they go through kind of core rights, like our rights in the First Amendment. And I mean, the numbers are staggering. 91% of people think that everyone should have equal protection under the law, 91% the right to vote, 90% the freedom of speech. And so people are almost unanimous in that, core American values, they say, yeah, we should have that. Now, once you start talking about the details, I'm sure when you start talking about free speech and even like social media, not even conservatives agree.
Right.
But generally, we might be more closer together than you might think, which I think is the point you were making earlier this morning.
Isn't that something? I mean, it must be the way they're asking the question, right?
Only
Real generic, real generalities, like, what should you have free speech, Yeah.
Right. Only 54% of folks said that it was extremely or very important, the right to keep and bear arms. So
how many?
54%.
Gun Owners of America and the NRA not happy about that.
No.
And the only one that the second worst to
Text contributors, listeners that have texted, and we're going to cover that in just a minute at 573-874-90-90. If you want to join in and comment on the things we report on, the analyses we make, the opinions we have, and a lot of good stuff. So we'll cover that in a second. But Hannah, last night you didn't know that you witnessed a little unfolding cop and robber action. Well, maybe.
Yeah. It was one of those things where you're confused by what you see one day, and then the next day you see a news headline and you go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I was headed home yesterday afternoon, and as I was getting ready to take the exit to get on the Missouri River Bridge to go into Jefferson City, there was a police officer behind me.
Uh-oh.
So I did what every driver does, and I slowed down. I was kind of nervous, 10 and 2.
Sphincter tightened a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
And as this car flew by me, it said Columbia Police Department. I'm like,
whoa, wait a minute.
like, you don't go here, sir. Yeah.
Maybe applying for a job. I'm sorry.
Well, he didn't have his lights and sirens on, but he was zooming, right? Like, he had somewhere to be.
Yeah.
And I get on the river bridge, and there are what seemed like a dozen or so police cars with their lights on. And I remember looking as I was driving by and going, oh, that looks like something big. I should text John about that. And then I forgot.
It was blowing up on Facebook yesterday afternoon.
Well, sorry I didn't get you the scoop on that, John. But I was very confused as to what was happening because there was a large police presence at the airport.
Yeah, it turns out it was a chase that started on Conley Road in Columbia around 1 o'clock. And like you said, Columbia police and troopers and Boone and Callaway County deputies chased the individual all the way to the Jefferson City Memorial Airport where they arrested him.
Wow.
And it was after an apparent robbery on Conley Road earlier in the day.
So where is the 500 block of Conley Road? 500 block. I've got to check this out because...
Is that over by the car wash?
That's what I'm wondering. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of bad stuff going down there on Conley Road. I mean, we got the Walmart murder a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. Last year, was it summertime when there was the shooting there at the Hy-Vee gas station?
Well, you said you just saw the map. Apparently, that's not just on Conley Road. It's all over.
I know, but there seems to be clusters of stuff going on there around in a shopping area.
Cluster is a great word, actually.
But I will stick up here a little bit for the Columbia Police Department because I did see they posted something yesterday, and they do have a new program out, I believe. And they're working on their recruitment, and they've got this new lateral transfer program where I think if you've got other law enforcement experience or perhaps military experience, they're going to start you at, according to Facebook, a little over $60,000 a year, and then you step up. So They are. I know they've been criticized heavily, and I think even on this show for having too many openings and vacancies and turnovers, but they are taking steps to try to fill some of those spots. So good on them for getting that. I don't know. I'm a little bit nervous in Ashland because I don't think we can pay that high, and so I'm like, are they just going to steal all of our officers? Hopefully not. But it's a tough market out there.
We should be clear that it's the decision making that we have problems with at the higher levels, the funding of the department, and really those are, I guess, council decisions. It's not the rank and file police officers.
No.
And when I said that police officer, was he applying for a job in Jefferson City? What I'm alluding to is it's perfectly clear. Matt Nichols has said as much. There was a flight away from Columbia Police, District to other places around.
What are they?
Boone Sheriff Department, others.
Yeah, like 40 personnel down right now at Columbia PD.
But they're taking measures to try to
that's a
up
good
their
thing.
ranks, and I think that is.
And
a good thing.
that's a shrewd move because correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Fort Leonard Wood a big training center for military police? I think they do a lot of MP training there.
The MP school moved from wherever it was in I think Alabama. To Fort Wood.
So, I mean, I don't know whether that factored into their decision, but I mean, if they're training a lot of folks down there, and certainly, I don't know if all of our signal goes. Does KWS go down to Fort Leonard Wood? I'm not sure, but
sure.
We're certainly in the area here to where I think maybe the word gets around. It's like, wow, you don't have to have formal police training. Apparently, the way I read the thing on the CP on the Columbia Police Department Facebook page, so that's a good thing to see. Talking about the elections and Jefferson City tacking a little bit to the left, I didn't know this, but they've had nonpartisan elections in Jefferson City. That's interesting. And one of our texters says, well, that may be part of the reason things seem to have changed since that happened. How long has that been in place?
Oh, gosh, forever.
Yeah, I don't know that they've ever really had partisan. I mean, everyone, and that's
Once upon a time, many decades ago.
okay. Well, and I know, with this, you were kind of asking what's to make of this, and I think with local elections, I mean, it's more about the candidate themselves. I mean, these are people who are known to us, so even though we have nonpartisan elections, folks how they lean, and so most people, I think, when they're entering the ballot box, know that. But it was just a bizarre election day, because the other thing we haven't talked about either is the stadium tax over in Kansas City failed big time.
Did it?
Yeah, big time.
Man.
And so, but you're thinking, okay, liberal city. They like their sports, and they vote. Why would they care? I think it was just a continuation of the existing tax, but they came out and voted against it. And so I thought that had passed with all the recent success of the Chiefs, and because it was going to improve, I think, Arrowhead and the Royals Stadium both.
Was that for the move that they were talking about?
Yeah, I think that was the primary deal on moving the Royal Stadium downtown.
I've always wondered. I mean, I remember being down at the old Busch Stadium, not the Sandlot, but the Busch Stadium with the arches, and the architecture back in 1966, I believe. I was a little tot, went down there. My dad was head of the band department at Lindbergh and took the band down there for the opening day ceremonies and the dedication. Man, I spent a lot of time at that park as a kid, and then with my children. And then when the new ballpark came around with sort of the going back to the future kind of a new ballpark design that really harkens to the older parks, I kept asking myself, what was wrong with the old stadium? It was a place where people can gather and watch people play baseball. Why do we need to spend gazillion dollars, ballpark village, blah, blah. I've always wondered about that, but I guess there's this insatiable urge for development of sports facilities.
But then again, you look at things, and I'm not a big baseball people. People kind of know that about me. But I had the opportunity to go to Fenway a couple of years ago, and but it is something magical about being there.
I was going to say
the history.
The experience is part of what sells tickets, and I think all the bells and whistles is a big part of the experience.
I don't know. Talk to a Cubs fan if you can stomach talking to one. They'll tell you, old Wrigley Field,
Well, I've been there.
Love it or leave it. They love Wrigley.
Well, I tell you, that was
we should call Scott Fawn, see what he thinks about Wrigley Field.
I remember a magic moment when my son was playing Little League Baseball and, really getting into it. And I was coaching, whatever. I was the first base coach and did what I could do, and having never played baseball.
You were the coach?
Well, I participated.
Okay.
And we used to do a lot of, kids that didn't play formal baseball like me. John, I don't know if you were in formal, organized, either as a part of the curriculum or, after school. But we actually became fairly adept at baseball because we played sandlot ball. I mean, we got out in the backyard and maybe it was a wiffle ball, maybe it was a torn up old baseball with half the cover off of it, but we played baseball. I think we all did that.
And a lot of us played organized Little League. Sure.
Yeah. And so anyway, but I remember I was at a conference in Chicago, and we went to a daytime, Cubs game when Harry Carey was still leading the Take Me Out to the Ball game. This was in the late 90s. And
holy cow.
It was unbelievable. We got seats right by the Cubs the bullpen, and it's right there by the seats, down the left field line, I believe it was. Yeah. And I mean, we got this big, tall, strapping reliever got ready, and he got up and was pitching. It was just really, there was something cool about that because you were within 10 feet of this guy.
That was me. Yeah, I think I was 6 rows back at Fenway, and I was just in awe, you're just in awe, and and then walking, some of the parts are so small, and you feel the history, and it's just, it's a evening I won't soon forget.
Stephanie, didn't you end up having to go buy a whole outfit to try to be in the appropriate team colors for that game?
I had to buy a whole outfit because I think I had only packed dresses. I was at a work conference, and then folks were like, do you want to go to Fenway? And I'm like, you don't say no to that. So I'm going to the mall to buy some jeans and some tennis shoes.
And a hat with a bee on
it. Well, we have more texts here, and we'll talk about those in the next segment because I want to spend a little time on the continuing and ever hotter feud between Marjorie Taylor Greene and Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. quite conciliatory when he was asked by Trey Gowdy, hey, how are we going to get you guys together and get any semblance of any conservative? And he kept using the word incremental change made, which I think all of us realize when you have what amounts to functionally a one-seat majority in the U.S. House of Representatives after the defections and the retirements. And, you got to ask yourself, what can a guy do when he's dealt a hand like that? And he said over and over, I've talked to I want to talk to Marjorie Taylor Greene. I want to get in touch with her. Well, then there's this back and forth going on in the ensuing, Monday and then into yesterday, where Marjorie Taylor Greene is essentially saying, I tried to call him. He wasn't available. He called me and he said he was exhausted. Could we talk tomorrow? Well, I don't want to talk to someone's exhausted. And she's just, yesterday, she's hammering on him. It's like, well, he's just playing the old Mitch McConnell playbook. We need a new Speaker of the House. She's filed that action. But you said yesterday it's something different than an immediate move to vacate.
She didn't file it as a privileged motion, so there's not going to be a required vote on there. It can just kind of hang out there. There'd be further action in order to force a vote.
Could she do that? Do you know?
I think she would need others with her.
So she'll have to get the Gates aide or someone like that to. Well, and I just ask the question. I throw it out there to you. 573-874-9390. This is mainly over Ukraine. She's like, why are we worried about Ukraine until we do the border? You talked about it earlier, Stephanie. He's trying to cobble something together to get some stronger border measure other than some of the little paltry things that were thrown at that with the recent budget bill. I think there was some money for technology and security and stuff. But he's doing his best, realizing that even if he got everything Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz wanted, nothing's going to happen in the Senate. So you have to factor that in if you're Mike Johnson, don't you?
Yeah, he's in a tough spot. I mean, a really tough spot with such a slim majority. And I think, I don't know that there's any hope that we find a path forward. And that's a real question that I've seen people, because this is like an extra spending package and not part of the normal budget. There's no deadline or they're not forced to take any action. So I think a lot of people who are watching right now predict perhaps there's no action here because it's just, there's not a lot of people who see a path forward that will have the votes to get there.
I've interviewed Marjorie Taylor Greene. She came out
Really?
with a book. Yeah. I think when we were doing the afternoon show, we had her on, last fall. She wrote a book. And, it was a dandy conversation. And when you listen to that side of the story, it's like, wow, full steam ahead. MAGA red, let's do it. Go for it. But then the practical politics of it just don't play out that way.
It's like listening to Bill Eigel, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Shot across the bow by Stephanie Bell on Wake Up Mid-Missouri, 654-43.
Good Bill or bad
No.
Bill?
I think he'd take that as a compliment.
No, he would.
But yeah, no, you listen to some of his ideas and you're like, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yes.
You're like, oh, no personal property taxes, yeah. And then you're like, well, where's that? Where do you fill the hole with that? And he's like, I don't know. We're just
Actually, we asked him that. He spoke at the Gary Nolan Christmas thing, and I was there.
okay.
And I had a bunch of people sitting around me, and everyone. And Bill's a dandy, very compelling speaker. And I asked him that at the private when he was working the room. I said, "How are you going to pay for that?" Maybe it was when he wasn't working the room up at the stump. And he said, well, there's plenty of money in the state coffers. We have the money, and we can make sure that people get funded for what they need to get funded. So the corollary that always comes along with that, cut taxes, whether it's income tax or is we need to cut spending. And I don't think anyone disagrees with that. Do you? I don't disagree with that.
No.
What are you going to cut? The minute you start asking someone to take a haircut there, wait a minute there, buddy. We're not going to take my cut off of my check.
Yeah, and I think, for me, it's really tough because, another really important principle, I think, of conservative politics has been for a long time things like tort reform, right? And it was just reported, I think, last week, Bill Eigel took tons of money from the trial lawyers, and I think how are you consistent with that if you are, the ultra MAGA, super right conservative platform candidate, but all of the personal injury guys are, in support of you. That's a tough one for me.
Yeah. We had one of our listeners text and says, I'm full Eigel. Okay. Jim says, look, he doesn't use the word Kip Kendrick. He uses a word that matches with Bravo Sierra, as Gary Nolan likes to say. Looks like Mr. Kendrick is on the wrong side of history. He might even help Lisa Meyer get elected, getting seniors out to vote.
That's an interesting
Two conservatives on the council.
Well, but that's an interesting perspective from Jim about why Lisa Meyer got elected, because of an issue that, potentially, and we don't know.
Brought voters out.
Brought voters out. And there was a lot of conversation. I've been hearing it more and more over the last week of all of those issues, if abortion makes the ballot, if sports betting makes the ballot, if the Osage Casino makes the ballot, they can, there's a chance that some of this is in August, some of it's in November. How those get aligned, who it brings out, I think is a fascinating discussion.
You're so right. And they've been talking on the national, I hear that drumbeat on the national circuit more and more and more. Even though people don't like Joe Biden, don't like his policies, think he can't stay up to do the job, what about that abortion issue? When that comes out, is that going to bring people out that say, well, I feel so strongly about this, I'm pulling the lever for that, and while I'm at it, Joe too.
And it's not just Missouri. I mean, we just saw the decisions in
joins us now, just off of her switch from Congressional District Number 3 candidate to Secretary of State candidate. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Hey, good morning.
So tell us a little bit about the rationale, what was going on, the gears were turning, you're looking at what makes the decision to go from one to the other?
Well, actually, I think the real obvious answer is interrupting me as I'm having to mute you right as I'm coming on this morning. My son is saying, Mom. I thought that I could rationalize. Chris and I had talked about it. He's an accountant, so his season of work that's really busy is in the spring. Of course, that coincides with the legislative season. And federally, there isn't a legislative season. And so we had talked and kind of rationalized that fewer days away during his busy season at work, but more days away total was going to be an even trade for our family. And the race felt really good from Missouri. But over our legislative break, I went up to D.C., and it just felt terrible to be there. The sacrifice of the travel really hit, and it realized it wasn't the right time for my family. Now, I came home from that trip, and I said to Chris, oh my gosh, I made a terrible mistake. I don't want to do this right now with our kids being still young and at home. And he said, okay, that's awesome, but you can't tell anybody until you decide whether you want to run for Secretary of State, because my phone had been blowing up for the last 3 weeks of people trying to get me to move races. And I'd been telling them to pound sand. I'm running for Congress. I'm going to do that job. And so I had to look at, for the next week before filing closed, do I want to do that job? And Stephanie, sorry, you were starting to ask a question, but I had looked at doing that job and running for that race back in the fall. I had conversations with Caleb Rowden and decided not to run against him. And not because I didn't think I could take him on, but just because I think he could have done the job competently. And when I looked at the field and the need, as well as that office does a lot of work that is really important to me and I focused my legislative career on, I decided to move into that race.
And you kind of highlighted it there, but elections are not something, and election reform's not something, and election integrity, I guess, is not something that's new for you. Talk about, some of the work you've already done in that area, and then, if elected, what your priorities would be in that office.
Yeah, so, that was why I had looked at the race in the fall, and that's why it seemed like a really good place to continue to serve not just the 3rd Congressional District, but all of Missouri, and got into it. I have been working on initiative petition reform my entire time in the Senate, as well as my time in the House, working on election integrity issues through my professional work at Thomas More Society. The firm has done a lot of work against sucker bucks, has done a lot of work about making sure that our ballots are all counted, that we're not having these illegal drop boxes. There was a lot that has been done via executive order. And if you have an executive officer who can stand up and say, that's not in the Constitution, I'm not doing that. You can't just, by fiat change the way that our elections are run, executive branch. I think we wouldn't have had a lot of the problems that we saw across the country if we had stronger secretaries of state who are in charge of those issues. But, there's other things, too, that are really important. We saw across Missouri last night conservative school board members really largely lose their races. A big part of that has been the recruiting effort is really hard to do because every single school district, by rule at the Secretary of State's office, they handled the registration for those races instead of every other elected official's, every other elected job across the state, which is done by the election authority in the county. So we could make a rule change, have a comment period, and move the registration to the county elected officials so that people know who's running before just the last day of filing. There's some really important work within the securities law area against DEI and ESG. Missouri taxpayers and people who incorporate their businesses have really a lot of protections that are in place to be able to have the best profit. That's the entire way our corporate system is built. And we've got businesses coming in and basically running benevolent corporations, which that's not what those incorporated entities are set up for. And so there are things that could be done that are protecting the conservative viewpoint of Missourians in that office. And I didn't see anybody in that race that had the experience, had the wherewithal, and had the integrity to be able to get that done.
Senator Mary Elizabeth Coleman, candidate for Secretary of State, joins us on Wake Up Mid-Missouri this morning.
Senator, you've been at right at the heart of the whole abortion issue from day one. Talk to us on your take about that faction out there that likes to say rape victims need legal access to abortion in Missouri.
Well, so what I would say is, and you're right, listen, I've been a pro-life activist my entire life. I was the architect of the Missouri Stands for the Unborn Act that ended abortion in the state of Missouri. I am fighting, actually, with Stephanie Bell right now and others to stop this really radical pro-abortion effort that's gathering signatures right now. They're really disingenuous about what is in that piece of, that ballot initiative that they're trying to push. They're saying Missourians are extreme, but when you read the language, they're not returning anybody to Roe. This is an extreme position that has been designed to confuse voters and to allow non-doctors, medical professionals to be able to use their judgment to have abortion on demand until the day of the baby's birth, to have taxpayer-funded abortions, and to get rid of all of the legal protections that mothers have who may be harmed by doctors in getting health care. And that's really scary and really radical. And so I would say that I'm really frustrated at people using the worst thing that has ever happened to somebody. We have to punish those who have those really violent crimes against women, people who are hurting people in that incredibly intimate way. But to use the most violent thing, the most awful thing that has ever happened to somebody as a talking point to allow abortion up until birth on demand is really disingenuous and I think really horrifying.
State Senator Mary Elizabeth Coleman is our guest here on live with us here on Wake Up Mid-Missouri at 7:15. I'm Brian Hauswirth. Senator, we appreciate you joining us, and I think this race is fascinating. I want to get back to the Secretary of State just in terms of the primary itself. You've got 8 candidates, including yourself, in the race. And I look at some of the other candidates, and I obviously won't list all of them, but just in a couple of them, Shane Scholler is a former, technically, he actually served as Speaker very briefly, but he was Speaker pro tem. You've got the Speaker of the House, Dean Plocher, in this race. You've got Denny Hoskins, well-known state senator from Warrensburg, who represents Cooper County and Howard in our listening area. Adam Schwadron. You've got, including yourself, 5 state lawmakers in this race and some others as well. 8-person primary. Can you win this?
Yeah, listen, I wouldn't be running if I didn't think that there was a path for me to be able to serve the people of Missouri. I have always had hard primaries. I've never had a free pass. I think the voters do better when there's a real stark contrast between the candidates, and I think that that's what they're going to find in this race. I'm really proud of my record. I'm really proud of the work that I've done to protect the state constitution against out-of-state interference with initiative petition reform, to help make sure parents have control instead of the NEA and other kind of special interests in kids' education. And there's work to be done in that space as well. And I just look forward to taking my message across the state and getting to know voters. And I feel really excited about this race. And I of course, see a path or I wouldn't be in the race.
Senator Coleman, I have to ask you about this initiative petition. We've found now there's 6 or 7 states who have gone from a strict ban, whether it's 6 weeks or even earlier, or an absolute ban like Missouri, to the absolute worst, which is pretty much unfettered abortion. And it seems like this pattern seems to be holding true in Kansas, in Ohio, and now it's going to be up for a vote in Florida. Is it possible that the conservative movement, the pro-life movement, and I consider myself with that movement, that we're getting into a situation where the enemy of better is best, and that the body politic just isn't where the conservative pro-life, I'll call it the pure pro-life movement is? And how do you answer those within the pro-life movement who are more moderate, who say, look, let's at least put some limit on this at 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever, so that we can at least save the lives of those babies beyond that? Because failing that, it appears as though if Missouri goes the way every other state has gone, despite the great work that Stephanie and you and others are doing, people just don't listen, and they vote for what they hear in the media and what the big money from out of state says. How are you calibrating that whole discussion? Because I think it's a valid one.
Yeah, listen, I think that this is a very divisive issue, and for most people, abortion is probably not their top issue. I think about 10% of the electorate and across the country, it's their most important issue or their driving force. And I think about 6 of those people are pro-life, and about 4 of those people are anti-life. And when you look at the people within that movement, whether you're pro-choice or you're pro-life, or pro-abortion, really, I think that it's hard to say that they're just pro-choice now, that they're celebrating abortions. There isn't anybody who's going to be able to say, you know what, for me, this is the most important issue, which, by the way, it is for me. I count myself among that 6% of the electorate who it is their most fundamental right, the right to life. But there's not really room for a moderate position in the middle. That is something that Jamie Corlew actually tried. She had an initiative petition for 6 different versions that she filed, trying to find a middle ground. And what she found was the people who are pro-abortion don't like that and aren't going to fund any efforts for that. And the people who believe all life is sacred can't trade away the lives that are protected today for maybe future protections. I think you're right. It's clear that we're losing the culture war right now. The mainstream media is intent on spreading lies. But I also will push back a little bit and say, Missouri is not Ohio. Missouri is not Kansas. Missouri is not Kentucky. We have had, as a pro-life movement, losses across the country when this has been put on the ballot. But we've also never seen an organized effort to try to stop the process like we have in Missouri. We have had litigation. We have had a decline to sign campaign, unlike anything that's ever been done across the country. And I also would ask listeners who are listening right now to please decline to sign. I know your listeners get that message a lot and probably hear it. But starting in February, to gather the number of signatures is not an easy feat. And there's kind of no amount of money that makes that an easy job. And Stephanie, you've done more work than almost anybody on these kinds of issues. You could probably talk pretty clearly about the success rates of people who are starting in February to get those signatures in by May 5th, which is when they're due. It's pretty low. It's a hard task.
Yeah.
You're exactly right.
I'm not convinced.
The decline to sign movement, I've seen it on your Twitter feed, Senator Coleman. I think Lieutenant Governor Kehoe has been very vocal and very out front by that. I think that's our hope. That's our hope.
Well, and also just the late start that they've gotten. I mean, They were disorganized. They were internally fighting. They couldn't agree amongst themselves.
Right.
They had 6 what, you might call more moderate positions. And then they had these 11 initiative petitions that were extreme. Unlike, really, also, by the way, what they're pushing in Missouri is unlike anything that's been brought forward across the country. It's the most extreme version with no protections for mothers who are undergoing, if it legalizes abortion, it also gets rid of any medical malpractice suits. That's crazy. I don't think anybody who has a moderate pro-choice view wants women to not be able to seek redress if they're hurt by these people.
No doubt about it. Well, it's interesting discussion. I hope that people will listen to the real truth about this initiative that may or may not make it. And I hope should you be elected, that you will also do something about people that misrepresent an initiative petition, whether it's this one or something else. I have personally had it misrepresented to me twice on the ground. And there's no, what is a person to do? I mean, that's how many other people signed it because it was misrepresented. So it's another way that you can.
They're telling people it's to protect the pro-life laws in certain areas.
Yeah, right. And they told me, oh no, this is 16 weeks. No, just 16 weeks. I said, like, heck, it's 16 weeks. I didn't use the word heck, but we're on the radio. of like the dog that I'm afraid I'm going to get slapped because I'm late again. I'm sorry, Hannah. Take it away.
It's all right. I'm used to it, Randall. This story comes to us courtesy of the Stephanie Bell / the Stephanie Bell's friend or family member who sent us a really weird new product that's hitting the market. I don't think there's a better way to say it. It comes to us from the company Velveeta, which I've taken a lot of flack on the show in the past for my love of mac and cheese. I am more of a Kraft mac and cheese girly myself, but it's all good, right? Velveeta joins the list of brands that are releasing weird merch. Hidden Valley Ranch last year came out with like a home decor line, and Cheez-It has come out with some real weird stuff. But now Velveeta, they have what they're calling their La Dolce Velveeta line.
Oui.
Yeah.
Hello.
It includes things like, of course, the mac and cheese, sunglasses, and now Velveeta Gold hair dye. So Randy,
Velveeta Gold hair dye?
Yes. The only color of hair dye they have released is the bright yellow gold color of the box, basically, that Velveeta comes in.
How do you think it'd look? What do you think? A little gold on Randy here? Just gold hair dye? No?
I don't know if it has much to stick to, Doc.
Listen to this. John, I'm wounded.
So if anyone wants to match their head of hair to a box of Velveeta macaroni and cheese, you should look into the La Dolce Velveeta hair dye.
Has anyone ever done, we have barbecue contests, we have chili contests. was to provide you with cloaked packaging and a Kraft mac and cheese and a generic mac and cheese and whatever the individual General Grocers or IGA, you know what I mean, would you be able to tell the difference? Have you done that?
As long as they were all like the powder-based cheese, I don't think you could tell a difference.
Good point.
Yeah. The
Velveeta is typically like a cheese sauce that you add, and that to me is very different.
Well, and my family member sent this to me because we kind of got in this debate when we were on vacation last week because I love cheese, and people kind of see Velveeta as like weird processed cheese. But I will tell you, I'm also, the summertime is coming, and Velveeta sells like the even shredded cheese, and it's like half the calories as regular cheese. So I've been more on a Velveeta kick because we're trying to.
Yet you want to crap all over Randy and I's string cheese and not call it real cheese.
Now, we love you, Stephanie.
Dye your hair with string cheese.
But we know we love you, Stephanie, but there is a bit of hypocrisy after all. I offer you my string cheese, which is actual low-fat mozzarella cheese.
The first ingredient is milk.
And it's pure.
I love cheese,
and
but
you
I
don't
cannot
like my string cheese. I offer it to you every day. You say, no, thank you. It's not real cheese. But yet you'll do shredded Velveeta.
I know.
Now, Randy, now that I think about it, though, you keep your string cheese like in your pocket, and that is kind of weird.
Hot.
If somebody just pulled a cheese stick out of their coat pocket and was like, "Hey, you want some cheese?" I think I would be apprehensive as well.
You want me to identify as you guys and carry a purse, a man purse?
And actually, like most
fridge.
really fine cheeses should not be refrigerated. Like they should be at room temperature.
When we do a charcuterie tray at home, we let it sit out for an hour or 3. It's got to get nice. And there's nothing like Swiss cheese.
I am looking at cheese sticks in your coat pocket here in the studio.
There's nothing like a little Swiss cheese that has that little dew that gets on it as it gets room temperature. It's a beautiful. The oils emanate from it. It's a
room temperature
thing.
is when bacteria and stuff starts to
Cheese is bacteria.
Okay,
Randy
true.
eats week-old tailgate food. He's not worried about bacteria. He's got the immune system.
He grew up. He founded his whole career on Petri dishes.
Oh, no.
I am science,
All right, Fauci.
Now, someone, Clay texts us and says, I wonder if the powder cheese packet can dye hair. I'm going to test it on my son tonight.
I'm sure it is. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you have been a toddler parent and they have had a birthday party and suddenly you're like, is my kid sick? Oh, no, they ate dark purple cupcakes today. And you're like, whose birthday was it? I mean, that food dye will get you.
Well, and I know that the Kraft mac and cheese has stained my wooden spoon before.
Oh, really?
Just like Garrett popcorn, that cheese popcorn up in Chicago, that stains your hands forever. But boy, is it ever worth it! Here's a nice shout out from a listener. Another winner of the week nomination is the MU chess team.
Yes,
just won a presidential cup or award or something. Now the best collegiate team in the country. Now that is remarkable.
Incredible.
Wow. Yeah, you can say all you want about Caitlin Cook and her 3-pointers, but for crying out loud, this is a big deal.
Clark.
Oh, Clark.
Who has made, history.
And
checkmate.
Because now, what is more, when you think about it, who's more likely to make the biggest difference throughout their life experience in contributing magical wonderment to the world? The people on the winning chess team who are going to probably invent the solution to cancer or whatever. And God love Caitlin, don't get me wrong. But I mean, these people are underappreciated. They're the brainiacs. They're the people that are going to change the world.
And they've developed a lifelong skill. I mean, you're not going to play competitive basketball at age 50. You just really aren't.
Yeah.
But you could play competitive chess well into your upper years.
I feel like you can't compare the two. Because you have professional athletes like Shaquille O'Neal, Michael Jordan, who, even long after their professional careers ended, they're still around. They're still doing good things. Shaquille O'Neal all the time is supporting charities.
But I'm talking about the relative impact of people that get so much celebrity and whole networks and the fanfare around sports personalities. And God love them. I wish I had a millionth of the talent they do. But I think we have a disproportionate media recognition and maybe the populace. Maybe that's why we're not getting out to vote, because we're looking at, whatever. But that's another argument. But, I think we ought to celebrate these guys and gals. Good for them on the chess team. Now, you guys haven't used the word poopy pants around me, but I'm going to nominate Jim as Mr. Poopy Pants.
And we got that term from you.
I have a new poopy pants nomination. His name's Jim. He's a frequent communicator on the text line. And I'm just going to let y'all respond to Jim. Jim says, mac and cheese is starch for lazy people who can't cook. Take it away.
Well, Jim,
who's poopy pants now?
And you,
Jim, no one claimed that cracking open a box of Kraft mac and cheese was some culinary gift to mankind. Okay, we know. You're not telling us anything we don't know.
I knew that would get her fired up.
But I'm offended by his comment. We didn't invent Poopy Pants because technically it's a character on Captain Underpants is Professor Poopy Pants.
There you go.
If you've had kids, as of lately, my kids used to call each other Professor Poopy Pants all the time.
My kids call me Poopy
Pants. But we were
Dan.
talking about Pioneer Woman has a really good mac and cheese recipe, and it is a culinary delight. And my mother-in-law, after I brought it over to their house.
Not an economic one. But...
No, asked me for the recipe, and then later when she tried to recreate it, she said, do you realize there's $40 of cheese in this one dish? And I said, sure do. It is delicious, though.
So, so David says brainiacs haven't changed it yet. I guess they mean the world. I don't know. Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, they probably did a little change in the world.
Well, if you look at the salaries, and you're talking about Caitlin going on to the WNBA, being number one pick and all that stuff. Starting salary, WNBA, $62,000. NBA, $1.1 million.
That's a crime. That's just a crime. But again, it's entertainment. Sports is entertainment for the masses, right? That's what it is. No one. How many people that watch sports aspire to join the NBA or be a WNBA star? But the bottom line is that we spend an awful lot of money in this country on sports and attending it and watching it and subscribing to it.
I get really
$50 for a WNBA game, $100 to go see the NBA.
Well, I get really poopy pants about it because, of course, I am in the era and the time of my life where it's all sports all the time in elementary, middle, high school. And, you see parents investing lots and lots of money. I'm guilty as well in trainings and in equipment and all of this. And I'm like, if we invested half of the time and half of the money that we invest in soccer or whatever, in chess or in science camp or in a STEM camp, and I've sent my kids to gifted camps and to theater camps and to music camps. Our kids would be so much better off because, everyone who thinks their kid is going to play for Mizzou, they're just not. They're not. I agree. And even if they do, guess what? They're going to play for Mizzou for 4 years, and then they're going to go out and get a job just like the rest of us. And so I think we need to be thinking as parents about how we can equip our kids for something beyond just college sports.
And I know that the people that listen to our radio station, you out there listening to this station, I would bet that you are unlike a lot of the parents, sadly, who put the blame on the schools for the failure of their children when they don't invest the time in the academic expectation and support of their children. You can, and I think I'm speaking for teachers, and yes, our beloved Dr. Yearwood. You can't parent children and teach them if that's the parenting and the only academic stimulus and expectation and support they get is when you have them in school as a teacher. I know my dad as a teacher saw that beginning to change. The culture changed in the 90s with technology. And all of a sudden it was like the school is just responsible for all the education. I drop them off and they're supposed to be brainiacs and I'm at home. That's the reality. It happens a lot. It really does.
Well, unless your 17-year-old has a 95-mile-an-hour fastball. But yeah, where are you coming from?
Well, and I'll let secondary education off the hook a little bit. I think Mizzou deserves a little bit of the blame because, Hannah, I'm going to go back to whatever, when you're offering classes like wine tasting or whatever for college credit.
As a food science credit, yeah.
Mm-hmm, and, maybe there's a cheese class now. Maybe we could all take that. Well, you had some pretty weird offerings, and I've heard other people music, like just like, oh, the Taylor Swift. Wasn't there a Taylor Swift class? I'm pretty sure there was.
That was also because I almost flunked out of college, and so I was just trying to get through.
Yeah,
College isn't for everyone, and
It's
that
not.
is okay.
Mine
That
is
okay.
mine is a skewed view of the world, perhaps. But I remember in grade and middle and high school, things were happening. People were absolutely obsessed with dinosaurs and with man and the moon and the space race and rocket launches. And I just don't sense that that's what interests kids anymore. And I mean, I had a lot of friends that were big sports people. I happened to be a band person. But first and foremost, we were about those kinds of curiosities about the world around us, the universe around us, the natural world. And I'm glad that the kids in the area can go to the nature school here and so forth. But I wonder, is that sort of like just a field trip, or is that something they're immersed in all the time in their educational experience? I don't know.
I don't know. We've talked to some pretty awesome, like FFA kids here on the program.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, that's true.
And some kids who are really developing some great leadership skills and other things. So I've been impressed by a lot of the local teenagers we've talked with, and I think they are doing good things, and I have high expectations for them as they move forward.
I think we have a select group of kids and their parents who, a lot of homeschoolers that talk about an investment in your kid. Holy cow. Well,
or for I think my kid would be worse off.
Now that we've dissed the whole sports culture in America, when we come back, we're going to talk about Mike Tyson's fight coming up. No, I'm kidding you. John,
is that the fight with the YouTuber?
Yeah, he's got a big fight. I hope he doesn't bite his ear off. John, what's
his name, at Hangzhou Children's Hospital in China, shared a video on social media after a baby boy was born there sporting a 4-inch long tail. The doctor suspected a condition called a tethered spinal cord, which means the cord is abnormally connected to the surrounding tissues, typically at the base of the spine. His colleagues advised against removing the tail, as to do so might result in irreversible damage to the baby. Hangzhou area of China, known for its large populations of gibbons, macaques, and other highly evolved primates, which of course prompted the brother-in-law of the mom to weigh in. Translated from the Mandarin Chinese, he speculated his sister-in-law may have been, quote, monkeying around, adding that the baby appeared to be a chimp off the old block. Now you know the rest of that story.
Oh, John. Now
With a little artistic license.
we needed that because the listener Randy said, referring to our last segment, that may be the nerdiest segment I've ever heard on your show.
Now that's
Not even close.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's saying a whole lot. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's true. Have you heard Stephanie talk about law stuff?
It's
Point
pretty
made.
nerdy. It's pretty nerdy.
Point
My
made.
favorite was John's text. Every time this show talks food, it is an amazing lesson in food expiration misinformation.
That's what they do with the old Velveeta. They process it into hair dye when it comes back.
Evan says curiosity's in a sad state in this country. I love tests. Homeschooled and was provided with so many books and encouragement. And so it's funny. We've had a lot of great texts this morning. 573-874-9390. Well, you know, you may not like everything you hear on this show, but you can always depend on it being curious and interesting. And so...
And if you're Randy, sometimes you just don't hear anything coming from the show because you have the wrong set of headphones on your head.
We have two sets of headphones, one of which is plugged in and the other isn't. And one of the headphones had its tail, but I didn't realize it wasn't plugged in. I grabbed that and I'm like, I can't hear anything, Hannah. And she goes, yeah, put on the other thing.
First rule of radio. Plug
in your headphones.
Plug your headphones in.
Come on, man.
Hey, it's early.
Second rule of radio, watch what you say when the mic is on.
Yeah.
And remember, the mic is always on.
That's true. Hey, we have to remind you to get on the InsideColumbia.net website. You can also navigate to your opportunity to vote in the Best of Columbia. Voting is now open. Of course, that voting platform has to be powered by sponsors who include Las Margaritas. They don't use any Velveeta there. I'm positive about that. Lakota Coffee, Creekside Pet Center, Heartland Homes Remodeling and Roofing, and Shangri-La Dispensaries. So you can get on there and you can vote for your, let's say, for instance, your favorite, radio personality.
Radio show.
Like producer Hannah is up for favorite radio personality, so you can vote for Hannah. But also, radio show. And we've been nominated, but it's like it's so hard for us to get ahead of the music stations, and we kind of
come on, we're not whiners. We're not whiners.
We have such a good wake up fam, but just once. It'd be fun.
We make our own music through talk and inspirational analysis and
Thank
opinion.
you.
And maybe this is cheating, but you don't have to live in Columbia to vote for Best of Columbia.
And I guess also we already won, right? Because we're the only talk station nominated, so we're already number one in that category.
I like the way you think.
Unless we have a write-in.
There were some, I think it was, somebody tweeted it out. I think it was the mayor of Willard, Missouri.
Yeah.
And there were like 350 votes for one person, 350 votes for somebody else, and 5 write-ins, and the other 2 people died. And so if just one of the write-ins would have picked somebody.
Oh no!
But I think it's a dead-on tie. I'll have to confirm that. But we had that here, and there were some really close races. I saw some highlights from. I think there were some down in Camdenton. Some people knocked off by just a handful of votes.
There was one of the school bond issues.
important, and they impact, I think, your perception of, and hopefully not, but maybe your experience with the justice system. That's why it matters to us. And to help us unpack that is Zack Smith from Heritage, our good friend from Heritage, also an author of a great book calling out the rogue prosecutors throughout the country. Zack, thanks for being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me on, Randy. Always great to talk with you.
So I am troubled about what appears to me to be a undue restriction of Donald Trump's First Amendment, and especially as a prominent political candidate, restriction on his political speech by Judge Juan Merchan, who has he's extended the gag order up in that trial about the hush money. Can you unpack that? First of all, tell us what Trump allegedly did and what got Judge Merchan so worked up, and now why there's a gag on him.
Yeah, look, unfortunately, this isn't the first time we've talked about these issues related to gag orders, Randy. And before we dive into the specifics of this particular gag order, I think it's good to put this in context. You know, we have the First Amendment here in the United States. We're very unique. Most other countries are not nearly as protective of free speech as we are here in this country. And one of the things we abhor under the First Amendment is something called a prior restraint. We don't stop people from speaking. If someone defames someone, if they threaten someone, we deal with it after the fact, either through civil defamation law or criminal prosecution for making a threat. But we generally don't prohibit people from speaking, and yet that's exactly what gag orders are designed to do. And so as a general rule, they're very disfavored, and judges are typically very hesitant to issue them. And yet we've seen them issued against Donald Trump, and not only in this case, but in others. But in this most recent gag order that's been imposed on Donald Trump, initially the prosecution asked for Donald Trump to be prohibited from talking about certain court personnel, certain prosecutors, certain things related to the trial. And so after that gag order was issued, Donald Trump posted on Truth Social raising concerns, saying that this judge's daughter, in fact, worked for a political fundraiser. The fundraiser she worked for had Adam Schiff and others among clients, and had, in fact, used this very criminal prosecution to raise money. Now, that's certainly a very interesting fact, to put it mildly. Certainly seems relevant to whether or not this judge would be biased in favor of or against Donald Trump. And yet this judge has now prohibited Donald Trump from continuing to make those types of statements. It's very chilling indeed. And as you mentioned, Randy, very troubling, given that Donald Trump is a leading candidate to be president of the United States.
You know, I haven't seen the tweet allegedly that the judge's daughter posted, but I think it's been reported by reliable source that she had a picture of Trump behind jail bars, you know, in one of her posts, like you said, related to, clear making a position where she stands. And so why is it that people involved in the prosecution and related to them, it's okay for them, but not good for the Trump? It doesn't make sense. It's sort of, and isn't the progressive side the one that wants to gag Trump from all different ways and in all different rationale? Aren't they the one that want to have Clarence Thomas, retire because his wife is a GOP supporter? It seems, again, we have a two-tier system of justice and we have a two-tier system of gag and canceling.
Well, I'm shocked to hear, Randy, that those on the left would be hypocritical about some of these issues. But unfortunately, yeah, look, you're absolutely right. And so what is good for the goose apparently is not good for the gander. And I think this is part of the all-out lawfare that we're really seeing being used against Donald Trump and many of his supporters right now. Keep in mind, one of the things that hasn't gotten a lot of airtime so far is John Eastman, one of Donald Trump's lawyers in the aftermath of the 2020 election, was just disbarred in California, based in part on legal advice he gave, based in part on statements he made. And so the First Amendment implications of this gag order, of the disbarment of John Eastman and others, it's very, very troubling stuff all around.
Now, we haven't spent a lot of time here yet on the show on these this pair of decisions that came out of Florida with respect to abortion. Can you we are going to likely, well, we'll see. There are folks currently circulating an abortion initiative here in Missouri. But it sounds like Florida voters are now also going to vote on an initiative. Can you talk about that case and the other one that they issued this week?
Yeah, happy to do it. Obviously these are being closely watched, particularly because of the potential political implications. We talk about the left weaponizing legal processes, legal systems. Many states have ballot initiative mechanisms that were originally maybe well-intentioned, designed to allow voters to get issues directly on the ballot, kind of allow voters to have a more direct say in constitutional amendments, particularly. Unfortunately, what we've seen many on the left try to do is weaponize these ballot initiative measures, try to put politically charged issues on the ballot in hopes that it will drive out left-leaning voters. We saw this in Ohio during the last election cycle, and I think the hope is that that same type of left-leaning turnout will be driven with ballot initiatives this upcoming cycle as well. And so Florida, certain groups of individuals in Florida had proposed a ballot initiative related to abortion. They'd also proposed a ballot initiative related to essentially legalizing marijuana in many instances. And in Florida, the Supreme Court has to review those initiatives to make sure they're not misleading, to make sure they comply with certain formalities, those sorts of things. And so the Florida Supreme Court just came out and said that both the abortion initiative and the marijuana initiative could appear on the ballot. And of course, both are designed to liberalize abortion law and marijuana, the ability to use marijuana in Florida. Now, at the same time, the Florida Supreme Court released an opinion saying both of those could go on the ballot. They also released an opinion related to abortion, essentially overturning some very bad prior precedent under Florida law. The Florida Supreme Court many years ago had said that the Florida Constitution, separate and apart from the U.S. Constitution, protects a right to abortion. The Florida Supreme Court said that decision was wrongly decided. They said that the Florida Constitution's right to privacy does not necessarily encompass a right to an abortion. And so they overturned that prior precedent, meaning that current abortion restrictions that the Florida legislature passed can remain in place.
All right. That's Zack Smith, legal fellow at Heritage and a former assistant United States attorney in Florida, and also author of a fabulous book chronicling the disaster area that are the so many rogue prosecutors, how radical Soros lawyers are destroying America's communities. The name of the book, Rogue Prosecutors. He joins us on Wake Up Mid-Missouri.
Randy, thank you. Zach, we appreciate you joining us. I want to talk about an issue that got a ton of play, certainly on Fox News last week, but former President Donald Trump went to a wake and was welcomed by the police officers and the police officers union at that wake and the family as well. But that officer in New York State who was brutally murdered. The former president, you heard what he said. He believes that just these judges, these prosecutors in New York State are soft on crime. I believe that man had been arrested 21 times, maybe 22 times. Your thoughts on that case and what happened up there?
It's tragic. It's tragic. And I think it should outrage all of us who look at the facts. Look, as Randy mentioned, I've been writing a lot about soft on crime prosecutors for several years now. Alvin Bragg is certainly at the top of that list. But there's more than enough blame to go around for what's happening in the state of New York right now. We saw Governor Kathy Hochul being turned away from that wake. The same thing happened with Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, when he showed up. And I think many citizens, but particularly police officers, are absolutely disgusted and fed up with policies that put their lives on the line. If someone commits a violent act, particularly if they commit a violent act against a police officer, they should be held accountable for that action. And certainly they should be detained pending trial if they pose a danger to the community. Unfortunately, the lax bail laws in the state of New York right now make that almost impossible to do. You'll hear stories about people who are in the country illegally, illegal aliens who have come across our southern border, who have ended up in New York City, who commit violent crimes. And yet, perplexingly, the New York State authorities release those individuals back onto the streets. And then again, we see the consequences when they unfortunately go out and commit further violent acts. But look, this officer's death was completely avoidable. It's tragic. And I think the members of the NYPD and the citizens of New York, and really all Americans, are right to be outraged that it happened in the first place.
Zack, could you just historically fill us in as far as, was there a time, maybe, sometimes we reinvent history in our minds. I recall a time where either severely, chronically, mentally ill people who either were a threat to themselves or others were just institutionalized. And I know Charles Krauthammer talked about part of the problem we've had with public safety in this country was sort of in the wake of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and sort of the dissolution of a lot of these long-term mental health facilities. But in a parallel way, wasn't there a time where after a certain number of violent act convictions, people were just locked away and the key thrown away? Or am I wrong? I mean, it seems like the threshold for which we label a criminal, non-reformable, either is non-existent or at least has gone up from a time in the past. Or am I wrong?
Right. No, you're not wrong at all, Randy. And in fact, look, I think anybody will tell you who's worked with individuals who are mentally ill or who are suffering from drug addiction or other substance abuse issues. Many of these individuals don't want to get the help that they need. And so one of the things by making arrests, by offering, in some appropriate instances, alternatives to incarceration, like drug court, mental health court, is you use a carrot and a stick approach. You give people a carrot. If you go get the help you need, you won't go to prison. But if you won't get the help you need, well, we're not going to release you back on the street. You're going to go to prison and you're going to serve out the remainder of your sentence. And so there's accountability and there's consequences. And I think what we're seeing in New York City, Chicago, St. Louis, San Francisco, in many of these big cities where crime is such a problem, we're seeing a lack of accountability. People are not being held accountable when they break the law. And so certainly no one is advocating for first-time nonviolent drug offenders to go to prison for 30, 40 years. But the fact is, this myth that there's a lot of these first-time nonviolent drug offenders out there serving prison sentences, that's just not true. And so I think we need to get back to the basics of holding people accountable, making sure that if someone breaks the law, they are arrested, they're prosecuted, and they're appropriately held accountable through our criminal justice system. And keep in mind, Randy, rehabilitation, getting the offender rehabilitated, that's a valid goal of our criminal justice system, but it's not the only goal. Incapacitation, getting someone off the street so they can't harm our community, that is also a valid goal. Retribution is what it's called in law school classes, but essentially allowing a mechanism for society to say that certain acts are so outside the bounds of acceptability that someone needs to be punished for committing them. That's a valid goal of our criminal justice system. And unfortunately, today, the focus has become too offender-oriented and not focused enough on our communities and the individuals who are victimized by these criminals.
And it just breaks your heart when you see that officer's wife break down as she talks about it and begging for someone to do something so it doesn't happen to another family. We see it here locally, we see it nationally, and it's just so sad. And the answer seems to be right in front of us, but the rose-colored glasses of the left won't let them see the answers. Zack, as always, enjoyed the conversation. I know we've got a lot to keep up with Donald Trump and his escapades and all the others, and we lean on you to do that. We'll be connecting again in a week or two. Thanks so much, brother.
Thanks, Randy. Take care.
All right, Zack Smith. He's right, and the answer's right in front of us. I don't know why it doesn't happen.
Well, and it depends on what the jurisdiction is, because in Boone County, Emma Adams, I'm just going to pick one real quick case. Emma Adams is accused of killing an autistic man and then setting his body on fire.
across the board. The S&P closed down 0.72. The Dow closed down a 1%. And NASDAQ almost 1%, so pretty significantly down. The futures this morning are also looking in the red. I think we've got Dow looking at 0.12% now in the red, S&P even more than that, and NASDAQ even more at 0.43% down. So not great. But we did yesterday. It was election day. Had some big happenings across mid-Missouri, and one of those was in my own lovely town of Ashland. The Southern Boone School District approved a school bond measure, and one of those approvals and one of the improvements that they're trying to make is for their what they call, I think, the VOAG, the Vocational Agriculture Building, and make some improvements there. And we talk a lot about college education, but I found this article in the Wall Street Journal interesting this weekend. It says how Gen Z is becoming the tool belt generation. And they actually have a bunch of data and studies out showing that more and more younger folks are actually entering the trades. And they said, and so the numbers are showing enrollment growth in vocational focused community colleges. It's showing workforce growth in fields like plumbing, like electricians, like carpenters, like welding.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and so
I get nervous anytime Stephanie mentions Gen Z because I'm preparing to get pooped on.
This is really good, and they're saying, we're looking at the effect of college degrees. A new study out says that, and by a labor analytics firm, says roughly half of college graduates end up in jobs where bachelor's degrees aren't even needed. Yeah. And so I think a lot of folks are facing, increasing debt. And what are my prospects when I come out? And they're making smart and rational choices. And I think that's great. And they interviewed one family and said, it took a little bit, time for my mom to get on board when I told her I didn't want to go to a 4-year institution. But once we kind of figured out that, the average salary coming out as a welder is $60,000 with like very little college debt, it was pretty, it seemed like the right choice.
State Tech and Lynn's got like a 70% graduation rate.
It's really good. And then they talk about, the people's perceptions changing about vocational education. And they have this really cool machine-looking thing where, they said it used to be Greaser's Hall.
I think just local news is like the most important stuff to me, even though it's kind of like bad stuff going on around me, but it's the most relevant to me.
Where I come from, there's an old plowboy out turning up dirt. Where I come from, there's a preacher man in a cowboy shirt. Where I come from, where a couple boys fight in the parking lot. No, nobody's gonna call the cops. Where I come from, see that door right there? Man, I swear that it ain't never been locked, and I guarantee that it never will. That old man right there in the rocking chair at the courthouse square.
I don't know. I don't think I have a favorite news subject to talk about. I think anything that creates good discussion, anything that you can talk about with other people, that you can exchange ideas without getting angry at each other, and you can share opinions and broaden your own thoughts on things. I think those are the best subjects to talk about.
My favorite news subject to talk about is probably the environment. I think people don't take into account what's going on in the world right now and all the pollution that's happening, especially in our oceans.
My favorite news subject to talk about is I like the local news because it doesn't get into all these politics and actually tells you what's going on in your neighborhood.
My favorite news subject to talk about is politics with history mixed together.
Favorite news subject to talk about is probably politics, just because everybody has their own opinion about it. I just like how they bash on Trump, and whether it's right or wrong, I think he's got a bum deal. But so I think it's fun to talk to people about it.
We talk about your work, how your boss is a jerk. We talk about your church and your head when it hurts. We talk about the troubles you've been having with your brother, about your daddy and your mother and your crazy ex-lover. We talk about your friends and the places that you've been. We talk about your skin and the dimples on your chin, the polish on your toes and the run in your hose. And God knows we're going to talk about your clothes. You know talking about you makes me smile. But every once in a while, I want to talk about me, want to talk about I want to talk about number one. Oh my, me, my, what I think, what I like, what I know, what I want, what I see. I like talking about you.
I just wanted to thank you very much for being where you are for 3 hours of my day.
I'm a new listener and already a huge fan.
You're calming for my soul.
Hey, hey, baby, can't you hear me calling? So let's stay home and enjoy the view. 'Cause I just wanna be loved by you, yeah. Don't answer the door, don't answer the phone. Let's tell the world to leave us alone. 'Cause I just wanna be loved by you. Baby, just you.
Welcome back to a Wake Up Mid-Missouri. Election 24, the season started last night. I mean, in earnest, the first elections, local, municipal in the region, a lot of interesting things happening. The bond issues in Ashland, as you talked about, yes, so the kids will get some upgraded facilities. Boone County, depending on what the commission does, senior citizens and eligibles will be getting a property tax freeze, maybe, depending on what the commission does. It's in their hands. And some interesting things in the city council in the city of Columbia. Lisa Meyer was elected in the 2nd District, and the Columbia Police Officers Association endorsed her. The president of that organization joins us now, Matt Nichols. How you doing, Matt? Thanks for being on, brother.
Thanks. Thanks for allowing me to come on.
All right. So interesting race there. We saw disparate and sort of, I think, confusing, well, maybe not, but Nick Knoth was recalled in Ward 1, a very progressive, liberal, and very sometimes violent area down the city. And out in Ward 2, Lisa, who's a law and order candidate, I mean, she was on our on our program very vocal about that. You guys, backed her up. Well, what do you think this is going to mean for public safety in and around Columbia?
Well, I don't want to take anything away from Lisa. Lisa had a great campaign, and we are just thrilled that she came out on top. And on the other end of that, I got to know Robert Shriver really well through the campaign. He had a great campaign. I would say that Robert is a friend of our association at this point, just based on the conversations that we had leading up to it. And I look forward to whatever's in store for him next to help the community move forward. But we're super thrilled for Lisa that she won that race and what she's going to add to it. But it's kind of like taking, one step forward and two steps back. Now we've, lost Nick out of the first ward, which, like you said, is probably the most progressive left-leaning ward, which is also riddled with crime, right? So having a voice of reason with Nick in that position, not to have that now is going to be detrimental.
Yeah. Well, I think that how do you suspect? I mean, it's going to be tough to ask you to pat yourself on the back, but do you think that the CPOA endorsement of Lisa made a difference?
I want to say that it did. And here's how I can equate that is, I remember the days pre-Michael Brown in 2014, that there was still a overwhelming sense of community support for law enforcement and really for first responders altogether. Post 2014, that really was there were a lot of detractors that pulled that overwhelming community sense of support for law enforcement away. Not that it wasn't there, but it wasn't as loud and prevalent as it was before. 10 years later, I feel like we're starting to get that swing back, and we're starting to get that momentum back. And we're starting to get those people who have been silent for the last decade. They are tired of seeing these progressive policies, this lack of support from municipal elected officials for law and order. And we're seeing those people starting to get loud again, and we're starting to see some of them, not all of them, show back up at the voting booth and supporting police with their votes through candidates, and for people who are really adamant about community safety and making sure that we have the resources that we need. And Lisa is that person for us. And like Don Waterman was a year ago. And I'm not trying to take anything away from some of the other elected officials, but those are a couple folks who aren't afraid to voice their support for us, much like Nick Northworth.
Thank you so much. CPOA President Matt Nichols is our guest here live on Wake Up Mid-Missouri. The Lisa Meyer race, obviously, President Nichols is huge. Her top priority is getting those 37 police officer positions they're short right now. She wants to get those filled. But I do want to ask you, I want to follow up on this first ward, because Nick Knoth not only was recalled, but it was not as close as I was expecting. 531 to 394, and we had you on in January on this show, and I ran the sound bites, and you heard me play them several days, and you said, Matt, that Mr. Knoth was targeted. Now, they said they were targeting him because they thought he had a conflict of interest because he was working for the realtors, but you said at the time he was targeted by those who support defunding and abolishing the police. I'm going to have you elaborate on that again. Do you still believe that, and why?
I absolutely believe it, and the reason why is, and I use this example when I talked to Randy before, is we would never do an appendectomy if we didn't have a diagnosis for appendicitis, right? That's all. their entire premise of recalling Nick was that he could, at some point, abuse his position as a city council person, or maybe he wouldn't recuse himself from a vote. It's not that he did anything wrong. He did nothing wrong. There was zero impropriety whatsoever. This was a preventative measure to recall him because maybe he could in the future. Just the basis and the premise of that is so asinine to me. It clouds my brain. That's what strengthens my belief that the group of people who put this effort together are absolutely the same people that want to abolish the police. They want to break the system. They want to break the process. They want to break the rule of law, because if they can break it, then they feel like they're going to have a hand in rebuilding it. And this is part of the same narrative that we see in these very progressive cities across the United States that in some cases are realizing, hey, maybe we actually do have to support our police. And maybe we do have to support the men and women that serve the community in these capacities. But absolutely, there is, in my mind, he was targeted because he did not give them the platform that they, these activists, these progressive individuals, didn't get the platform like Pat Fowler gave them when she was a city councilwoman, and I think it made him mad. And what do you do? When my toddler gets mad and throws a fit, either I can give in to him or I can discipline him and see which way it goes. And that's what this is.
That's tough. Well, we did see an announcement yesterday on the Columbia Police Facebook page about lateral hiring and some pretty significant starting pay. Any thoughts from the CPOA on that program?
Yeah, I really have to give credit where credit's due. We have, over the course of, years and years and years, been struggling with pay compression issues. I've used the example numerous times. 2019, we were so compressed that a brand new cop was making the same amount as a 20-year detective. When City Manager Glasscock was the interim and then into the permanent position, we made some moves to be able to kind of get that spread apart. Same thing with City Manager Seawood. City Manager Seawood has been really pretty good to work with when it comes to spreading people apart and trying to help with some of that compression. So fast forward to Monday this week, we have been able to close some of the distance where we need to be. The plan that was approved is not what we asked for. Wholly, it was not what we asked for, but it's not bad for us. There is still work that needs to be done. The step plan is what the city calls it. It's really not a step plan. These are positional moves. These are, by year moves that we're moving people into based upon their experience. But there is no recurring year after year like a traditional step plan is, which is what we have been really pushing for and fighting for. But yeah, you're absolutely right. These are substantial moves. Giving people credit for lateral transfers, even up to 10 years credit. And with that, I want to say they're going to be somewhere in the $70,000, $72,000 ballpark if they come in with those years of experience.
When the debate was going on the other night, I think the number they used was 32 or 34 vacancies at CPD. I guess a question for a lot of folks out there, where are these guys going? Are they staying in law enforcement? Are they going to other mid-Missouri agencies? Are they going to the patrol? Where are they going?
All the above. It's really interesting. We have lost a number of people to the Sheriff's Department. We've lost people to the University Police Department. We've lost people to the Jeff City Police Department, the Cole County Sheriff's Department, Perryville Police. We lost a couple folks over there, and I know they're not quite in central Missouri, but we are absolutely losing people to other law enforcement agencies. But we're also losing people to local businesses here in town. That's the really great thing about Columbia, and what makes Columbia so unique is, I would say probably more than half of the folks that we employ aren't from Columbia. They are transplants. They come here for school. They come here for a spouse's job. They come here for whatever reason, and they end up staying. And the problem is we don't give them enough of a reason to stay long term like we used to. And so with these new pay increases and with some of these lateral transfers, I absolutely believe it's going to help with the retention. And that's really what, throughout the negotiation process, we all but begged the city to really focus on is retention. We can hire as many people as we want. We can go hire 100 people tomorrow that have no law enforcement experience. But I would rather have 50 people that have significant experience to stay rather than hire 100 that we have to try and train. And the city did come through, and like I said, it's progress, but it is not perfection by any means.
Matt Nichols, thanks for your leadership of the Columbia police officers, and also thank your brothers and sisters in the organization for their role in helping support the elected officials who, in turn, support their ability to serve and protect. We appreciate you very much, and please spread the word among the ranks, please.
Will do.
involved.
John, you
know,
never
it's 5
drink
o'clock
before noon,
somewhere.
do you? Well, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. God rest his soul, Jimmy Buffett.
You never know.
So I love to tie one on almost every morning. I like to put on a necktie.
You got a fancy one going
Now,
on there.
well, yeah,
More
there's
people
a
are
story
watching the
behind every
video.
necktie. Now, there's a story in the Wall Street Journal in the style and fashion section. And I am anything but Mr. Style and Fashion. Just ask my wife.
Yeah, you have a person for that.
Ignore the president's neckties are waging a comeback, the headline. At the big fundraiser last week when Joe was hanging out with Barack and with Bill, they all had the cool, just the coat with they're wearing suits. Now, Barack had a real style, a fail. He had a sort of a dark gray coat and then a lighter gray pair of pants. That was not.
He's had some issues.
Yeah.
Usually he's pretty well dressed.
Not good. But
he just came straight from the beach, though.
Yeah.
Michelle must have been out of town.
I guess so. But Barack, it doesn't matter what Barack does. He is just so Mr. Cool. It doesn't matter. He's just Mr. Charisma, Mr. Cool. But the whole story is about how, there's been a big decline internationally on the sales of neckties. They've gone out of fashion. Everyone's, using it. But there are pockets where they actually are coming back into style. There's an influencer named Dennis Balmaceda and his girlfriend. Now, she has a tie on. For a while, women wearing ties was sort of fashionable, wasn't it?
I think it's kind of cute, actually.
Yeah, I like it. It's a good look. And
Cyndi
this guy,
Lauper.
Yeah. This guy has ties that it's crazy. One of them, it says he spends $200, he has a punchy pink $230 Louis Vuitton number that was recently made in collaboration with rapper Neo Prepstar. No, this is a Rush Limbaugh tie.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And
That's cool.
in the day, I have a bunch of Rush Limbaugh ties. I think he got divorced from her, his first, I don't know, it was the 90s wife. I don't know how many wives he had.
I think like 4,
Yeah.
right?
But she helped him with the design. And you know what's cool about Rush? Like conservatism, we believe in excellence, in governance, in freedom of speech. We love our guns. We love to handle them and own them. We just love doing things. Look at the tie, or every tie, the smaller end has a little stay. Usually it's just a piece of cloth. Look at that. It's a
gold bar.
It's not real gold, but it's, it's nice.
Or fancy.
To keep it all contained. Look at that design. See? So
That's nice.
I like wearing fun ties. One of these days I'll have to wear the ties that the kids made years ago. What do you call the glue?
Puffy paint.
Yeah, I got puppy
You
paint
have a
ties.
puff paint tie?
Puffy
Paste.
with an F.
Oh, puppy, not puffy.
Puffy. There you go.
But men really
like the
have...
rapper who got raided in L.A.
Yeah.
You have limited options, right? So, be it socks or ties or cufflinks, or I think are making a comeback a little bit.
Yeah.
I think they can look really nice.
I think and this guy says the way I feel. When I wear a tie, I just feel better. I don't know why. It must just be me. But other people don't do well at all unless they're cash. That's a new word, cash. Like Riz.
Oh.
No,
I just dictate.
Thank goodness.
I just developed a new